Go. I'm getting the thumbs up. So we'll call this meeting to order for the Arizona National Criminal Background Check Task Force. I'd like to invite Andy Lefevre to open up the meeting and say a few words. Andy, if you're ready. Andy is the Executive Director of the Criminal Justice Commission.
Good morning. Can you hear me, Lloyd?
Yes, I can.
Thank you, everybody. We greatly appreciate, as always, your time on these meetings when we pull them together. And while we're sorry we don't get to see you in person, we appreciate that we're able to gather together virtually and talk through these issues. You know, the work that this task force has done on behalf of the citizens of Arizona over the last 10 plus years has been nothing short of remarkable as far as the issues that you've addressed and identified that need to be addressed. You know, the time and energy that you put into talking through those issues and what for me is oftentimes such great detail and so in the weeds that I don't understand half of what you're talking about, but we have smart people that do, that can come back to me and explain it to me in Andy talk so it makes sense, which is what I need so I can go and explain it in legislator talk, which is even simpler than what I understand some of the times. But you know, we've done some really great things, and I know that we've taken a little bit of time here to really try and say, how do we refocus what we're doing here on the NICS task force, and you know, what is the next couple of years and our goals and objectives going to be. So really appreciate that work and Tony's guidance on this, and I'm just really look forward to listening again and learning as I always do. And again, just know that from myself as the director of ACJC and from our commission members that are appointed and that serve, we really appreciate the knowledge and experience that you bring to this process, and look forward to supporting those ideas that you come up with as best that we can. So Lloyd, I'll turn it back over to you, and I'll get my ugly mug off the screen.
Thank you, Andy. We had scheduled a legislative update. Our PIO is running a bit late, so we will schedule that for later in the meeting. Sorry, Andy?
I was going to say you can keep my ugly mug on if you want, but I'm happy to let Molly take it when she's available if it doesn't mess up the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, we'll reschedule that when she's available. So let's move ahead with the presentation. Tony, I will hand it off to you.
Yeah, Lloyd, if you can hit the next button there. Next slide.
One moment, let me.
Well, thank you, everyone. For those that don't know me, because I took a little sabbatical for a while to get myself educated, and my name is Tony Colson. I have been working, as most folks on this call know, I've been working with the NICS task force since its beginning, its inception, and have worked through a lot of these issues and things that we've done together. And I'm a consultant for ACJC. I also have other work that I do, consulting work, and travel quite frequently all over the country. And to other parts of the world. So it's good to be back working on this. In talking with Lloyd and Andy in terms of re-engaging back into the task force business, I think one of the big issues the change that needs to come forward, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But this is our agenda moving forward. We're gonna talk a little bit about refocusing the mission of the task force. We're gonna talk about new things in gun violence prevention that works, and how those relate to the NICS task force, and how the NICS task force has to be prepared for the future. And I'll talk about that a little bit as we move forward here. Then we're going to talk about existing projects that some of us have talked about for now years that are that we've accomplished. And then we're going to go to what's been hanging out there in terms of what we haven't quite finished up yet. And then we're going to talk about a support focus and then next steps. This whole meeting is about re-engagement, kind of refreshing, taking a step back, assessing, and moving forward. So that's our plans. Anybody can jump in if they have a question or they want to make a comment. As I move through this in the first parts, as I do a presentation piece to kind of set us up, we'll be having more discussion kind of after I present a few things about a focus. So Lloyd, the next slide for us. So in refocusing, there's a couple high agenda, kind of high level pieces that we want to talk about. One, and it's we got to make sure, which Lloyd and Andy have brought forth. When we talk about certain things, we got to bring it back to the NICS task force. Our report, our strategy, and how it improves systems. So when we talk about gun violence prevention, we're actually talking about harm reduction strategies. And the NICS task force and what the NICS task force has done with AZ Point, mental health determinations, and a bunch of fingerprinting and other things are all subsets, are all action items that are part of a larger harm reduction strategy. The NICS indices and doing background checks and making sure that there's records in the system that are accurate and that are put in timely are all about reducing harm, how to prevent firearms from getting to those people that shouldn't have them, with the hope that reduces our vulnerabilities in terms of someone using a gun to harm someone. So when we talk about gun violence prevention, and I mention it and you hear about it, we're actually talking about a larger strategy in which the NICS task force and NICS reporting and criminal justice records actually impact. It's a larger harm reduction strategy for the nation, for our state, even down to our local communities. So that's a big part of what we do. We do it by building, automated systems in the criminal justice system to get these records in. Now, we don't want to. Why we're talking about this now is because for years in the legislature, these gun violence prevention harm reduction strategies have been introduced in the legislature. A lot of them, most of them, have not successfully made it through. But year after year, everything that I'm going to talk about in the next slide has been proposed in legislation. And we have to be prepared for, if the climate changes and legislation, some of these pieces that have been proposed year after year after year do make it into law or statute, then we have to be prepared as a task force of how we're going to capture those, how we're going to take advantage of those laws in terms of capturing information that will be deposited in one of our criminal justice systems somewhere in order to have, again, timely and accurate reporting for criminal justice system records so that they can prevent someone from obtaining a firearm or having a firearm or possessing a firearm. So that's what we're talking about. And we have to be aware that these things next year, possibly as soon as next year, could start happening in Arizona. So those are key things. What we have to do is be able to say, okay, if they do happen, what data can we draw down? How do we capture it? Is it capturable in a system somewhere? And how do we then measure those things? So, every strategy has an action. Every action is designed. Every action has performance measures, and this is how we measure effectiveness. And when we talk about assessing implemented programs for effectiveness, now's the time. We have AZ Point. We have mental health adjudication reporting. We have fingerprinting before a sentencing, like eliminating the gap issue that we had years ago. So now it's time to analyze that data. We need to conduct research, and we need to come up with some findings or some to advise folks. First of all, to advise the commission, because we work through the commission to get information out, and how that information will inform policy or legislation as we move forward. So that's a big issue. Then we need to talk about existing projects and how we get them to the finish line. Conditions of release, getting rid of the paper FDRs somewhere in the future. We've talked about it for years and years and years, by making people actually use the systems that are out there, and how we bridge those gaps. So we have to start talking about, okay, so they've been sitting on the table. We've been working on them. How do we bring them to closure? I wouldn't say bring them to closure, but how do we get them actually launched and used effectively? And then we go right back to what we've said before about the systems that we have successfully implemented, and how we assess their effectiveness in terms of what they're doing, how we tweak those programs to then make them more efficient in gathering data for us and putting timely data into our systems. In the end, this is all about results. Okay, we have to evaluate all these performance measures in terms of how it impacts different pieces of a harm reduction strategy. Some of the big issues with the biggest issues with gun violence is suicides, more than homicides. Suicides, I think we rank 18th in the nation in terms of suicide, our suicide rates per 100,000, and I'll show a slide on that later. Homicides, firearms related injuries, and the threats that go along with having guns in people's hands that shouldn't be having guns. Now, one thing I want to talk about is that suicides, homicides, firearm related industries all have a very large financial impact on Arizona. Healthcare costs, lost wages, go on and on and on. And there's been a study that actually looks at this in terms of the billions of dollars that Arizona loses that are related to firearm related injuries. So there's a cost to not having an effective harm reduction strategy. So one of the things that we want to do is we want to look at results in the long term in terms of, are these programs that we have in the NICS task force sponsored, worked on, helped, AOC or DPS or anyone else bring into the mainstream, are they effective? And then actually, how are they relating to the average citizen in Arizona? Are we making Arizona a little bit safer? Are we reducing the cost of this violent crime, especially gun-related crime, for the citizens we have here? So, next slide, Andy. Or Lloyd, next slide, if we could. There we go. So these next three slides that I have here are just kind of examples to show what it is, and really, what's important here is as we refocus on missions, we have to, and I'll get into this. We have to kind of start looking at the data that we have that's confronted us. These are youth mortality between the age of 1 and 19. This is comes from the New England Journal of Medicine. So it's a peer-reviewed research based on a research study. I just pulled one of their charts off from one of these studies. And if you need to, we can supply the reference in terms of the background material of where this came from. But it does show, the number one cause of death for ages 1 through 19 are firearms. Firearm-related deaths for youth between 1 and 19-year-olds. It's firearms. It's not anything else. It's not overdosing from fentanyl and stuff like that. It's from firearms. So these studies are out there. They've seen it. Lloyd, you can go to the next one. On one side, this is from Pew Research. Suicides account for more than half the deaths, and that's consistent in Arizona. Suicides account for most, and kind of a goal of, these NARPs are access to guns, especially guns for people in crisis. And I'm going to show you a few strategies that we've talked about. Next to that is gun rates, by death. These are the late 2021, 2022 are the latest statistics that these national agencies have gathered from information. We sit in the top part of this. We're 17th or 18th in terms of ranking, in terms of gun deaths, in terms of states. And if you look at this map, coincidentally, those states that have more restrictive gun laws are those that have a lighter color. And those that are less restrictive, you see, have a darker color. So, we need to come up with I wouldn't say we need to come up with any strategies, but when strategies come into play through either legislation or policy, we need to be able to capture some of this information to kind of relate to what our programs, AZ Point, mental health determinations of how, and accuracy in our criminal justice system records, how they impact these rates. That's a key here. Next one, Lloyd. I can see this is that map. This is just the statistical figures in terms of deaths and rates, and 18.3 per 100,000. So we're like to be not in orange is where we'd like to get Arizona decreased in terms of those numbers in that death rate. So what works? I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because these, these are things that all these issues that are listed in gray, all these factors that are listed in gray, are part of are the law, are the exact, almost map these strategies have been introduced in the legislature over the past probably 5 years, consistently every year. Same people introduce the same ones. And again, we have to be, one of the things that we have to be just wary of is that some of these may pop and they may come into play. And if they come into play, how are we going to capture some of this information that's out there? So why I put these up here, and I've done a research. I have a paper that I've shared with ACJC in terms of, while on sabbatical, I did kind of educate myself, kind of explore this, and have a published paper that I have done with some of these strategies in mind. And I wouldn't say in mind, that I've looked at these and the data behind it. So, and these are evidence-based. So they've been studied, they've been researched, they've been documented with a methodology in terms of statistical analysis, and they've been peer-reviewed. So everything that I have here, and I'll show you the slides that come next, will show all that research that went behind this. But these things work. These things work in reducing these rates, these gun death rates, injuries, suicides. These work. And you'll see where they kind of connect up with the NICS task force and, our strategy that we've had for now almost 11 years. Over 11 years, we've had the strategy that has had some of these issues in there. The first one is and the most is lengthening the time from purchase to acquisition. A lot of states call this, don't move this up yet, just stay with this, the last slide, Lloyd. So go back one, if you can. Okay, stay here, and we'll. So a lot of things have been studied, and it, a lot of it's called permit to purchase, and that is you can't buy a gun unless you get a permit from the state authority in the state, which is usually the state police in that state, to get at that purchase a gun. And that does a couple things. And why I took out permit to purchase, because it's not probably a realistic idea in the near future, but it's all about lengthening the time to purchase. And that lengthening the time to purchase extends that period where someone it does a couple things. It extends the time that we, folks in the criminal justice system can do a background check to ensure that everyone that's getting a gun is not prohibited from obtaining a gun. In Connecticut, when they instituted this law, this permit to purchase, or extending the time frame, or another aspect of this is limiting the amount of guns that you can purchase at one time. You can only purchase one gun in a 30-day period. So all these strategies were to extend that time period. And I should say the other piece of this is you can go in and purchase a gun, but you can't actually take possession of it until the background check is done and completed. So all these strategies reduced, like Connecticut had a 28% decrease in firearm suicides, 33% over a 22-year period. After Missouri repealed their permit to purchase law, their homicides increased by 47%. and their suicides increased by 23%. When changes in these handgun laws permit the purchase and lengthening in this time, they decreased fatal shootings in Connecticut. I should say this. States that have this type of strategy decreased mass shootings by 56%, and officer-involved shootings where officer was injured were decreased radically in there. And I could read the numbers off to you, but I'm not going to. So these types of laws are evidence-based. They do reduce gun violence. They've been studied, documented, and I'll show that to you in the reference here. So, but the whole purpose is to get the background check. And that's where we come in terms of making sure that we are capturing, the most accurate records possible, putting them in on a timely basis so these background checks can be done to support some of these strategies. The next piece is the extreme risk protection order. And this almost, when Governor Ducey was in place, this almost got through in terms of, they called it the STOP law, to give other folks the ability to, when someone was in crisis, to give parents, teachers, police, particularly police, the ability to get a protection order that removed firearms from someone primarily. Now, in where states have implemented this extreme risk protection order, and there's states that a lot of states that are doing this, suicide rates decreased by 40% overall. Most of these extreme risk protection orders, 97% of them were obtained by police. So this gives a piece of this to these extreme protection orders of those that are in crisis, that there's some way that could be intervened, or you could intervene. This was something that wasn't available to the parents that, in the shooting in Tucson in 2011. It wasn't available to the parents at the time for extreme risk protection order to kind of eliminate this. Whatever prevented it, we don't exactly know, but this gives an extra tool out there to, especially with folks in risk, and this will be kind of ties into the state storage laws also. So there's that piece, and this extreme risk protection order piece is so well documented in terms of research that has been done in terms of effectiveness. The next thing is for domestic violence and extreme risk protection orders. The other strategy is firearms removals. How do we provide safe strategies for law enforcement officers to actually move forward with retrieving firearms that are out there, which is extremely, extremely dangerous. This is the shooting in Tucson where, a deputy United States Marshal was killed, trying to get a firearm back or retrieve firearms from someone. These are high risk events. So the strategies, a lot of folks in law enforcement are coming up with strategies in order to make this a safer, how to draw somebody out, how to wait till they, are not in the home of getting these firearms back. So the next one is safe storage laws, and this is kind of a big one. We don't have in Arizona mandatory reporting of lost and stolen firearms. And so we have no idea how many guns are lost and stolen in the United States. And it's just an estimate because only a few states have mandatory reporting laws. There's an estimate that between 200,000 and 500,000 guns are stolen or lost in a year. We know that many of the crime guns that end up showing up in these crimes all over the United States, and Arizona is no exception, that most of these are lost or stolen firearms. Usually these firearms are stolen from people that have that don't practice safe storage. So they're carrying and they leave them in their car. Most of these guns, a majority of these guns are stolen from a vehicle because there's no safe storage. With children, some states have child safety storage laws to where you have to have safe storage of a firearm in your home if you have a child in that home. And if you don't, you're held liable. And we can see that now liability is coming into play with this recent conviction of the mom and dad, whose son had access to a firearm that they purchased. So that they claim was either locked up or not locked or whatever they claimed at the time. So that is a big piece. With the state storage laws, there's also states that have successfully implemented laws that open up temporary storage facilities for those that are in crisis, those that have a protective order against them or extreme protection order. There is a way for them to deposit that firearm in a safe storage facility, privately run, that holds that firearm until there's a legal document that allows that gun to be returned to the owner or turned over to someone for either destruction or resale. So those laws exist, and where it kind of all ties in with extreme protection orders, firearms removal, state storage laws are all kind of can be tied together in terms of providing some tools for folks to then store the firearms easily. Mandatory reporting is a critical piece for lost and stolen firearms. Critical piece. And Arizona does have people that have reported lost or stolen firearms, and they are in systems somewhere. So we need to, but it's not mandatory, and that's a problem. The last strategy that works is strengthening the concealed carry weapons permitting. And we've talked about that here in Arizona in terms of providing an avenue for licensed dealers to check the validity of a CCW in Arizona. And I think that we'll talk about that a little bit more later as we kind of roll through this of how maybe we need to see where that is in terms of a possibility of getting it out there, even if it's used on a voluntary basis with no strings attached, just a service that's provided to FFLs. So I put these 5 things up here because they are evidence-based, but I put these 5 things up here also because they have been introduced into the legislature year after year after year. And it's possible that things could change and that some of these actual proposals or submissions will actually succeed in coming years. And what we need to do is to plan about a little bit about how to capture some of these things, because I think there may be a need to inform folks if they're going to introduce legislation of some other things that may come into play in how we capture data, like we've done with AZ Point and fingerprinting, to where we've had to modify some legislation in order to, even on the fly, in order to make it work in terms of reporting in systems, repositories, and collecting data. So those are out there.
Tony?
Any questions or just?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to know that there have been legislation introduced, and all of the legislation died this year in session. We either were not heard or did not move forward. So there clearly the current political climate is not in support of this. You might be right that it could change in the future, but this is certainly a passionate and deeply held belief systems, both for and against, that we're dealing with. I wanted you to present this because, as a criminologist with your history, your paper outlined a lot of this, and I think it's important for us to have a discussion and have that discussion framed around NICS narrative, and to look at evidence-based promising practices in other states so that we could discuss what's possible here in Arizona. So I wanted to also acknowledge that this is not a recommendation coming from the commission or from staff to the commission, but it's really to provide a discussion space on, I think, very important topics, certainly related to the work that we're doing with the task force. So thank you for presenting this. But yeah, I'm sure we have some folks who would like to weigh in. So if we could take maybe a few minutes to open it up to the field. If you want to raise your hand or unmute. Let's see, Molly. Go ahead, Molly.
So thank you, Lloyd, and I apologize for being late. But Tony has brought up some really, really important points, and we've had lots of discussions internally, especially about ERPOs and things of that matter. But as Lloyd stated, the legislature has basically none of the measures that involve firearm removal, safe storage, or any of those have passed in the Arizona legislature, which a lot of it has to do with our political climate, the NRA, their lobby down at the Capitol. Who introduces the bills is another challenge. And I know we talked about a lot of aspects with respect to CCWs. I know at one point we had introduced a bill, especially when you talked about the U.S. Marshal that was killed. And the individual that killed him was somebody that was waving around his CCW and his face saying, look, I've got a CCW and I'm a convicted felon. So I think that there is, within the framework, Tony, of what you've talked about, which again is the commission isn't saying, we are doing this, but it provides, I think, a really good opportunity for discussion with this group, which many of you know I'm starting to send around articles of information that have been coming out in the news about gun issues and things of that matter that do open up, because eventually maybe our political climate might shift and there might be a appetite for wanting to incorporate some of the things you've talked about, Tony, because some of these states have had great success with it. I just don't know if they would have success here. So I just wanted to weigh in on that a little bit.
Thank you, Molly. Anyone else? Amber or Rachel, go ahead.
Good morning. On that first topic, I just wanted to, I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but Arizona is not what we call a POC state, which is a point of contact state. We do not make gun decisions. So a change in Arizona law giving us more time would do no good. because DPS then would have to have another unit added, more people, more personnel, and set ourselves up for possible litigation. So we let the FBI make those good decisions. I would be perfectly happy if the FBI changed their policy and their law in 3 days. It would help us out dramatically. But I just wanted to put that out there that DPS is not a POC state for Arizona.
Yeah, you know, and that's an important point, and it goes with Molly, is that, you know, when legislatures propose these things, it's really important that they do it. I don't know how you play into it, but that it's an informed decision that, hey, if you do something like this, this is what it means to DPS. This is what, you know, there's a cost behind this. That if you want us to stand up something behind here, we have to add people, cost. You know, there's real dollars behind trying to do some of this. So you want to make sure that with some of these strategies that they're kind of informative, that there's a back end behind it that may, you know, you don't want to have something implemented and then scrambling to try to figure out how to do it both legally within the law and with personnel and with resources that can be maintained over a period of time.
Other questions, comments? I'd like to add also, I think there's some not unintended consequences, but some consequences we should consider for folks who are temporarily in crisis. Providing safe storage is important, but the restoration after that can be complicated, or we might not have the right systems in place to ensure that their rights could be restored timely and responsibly. So I think you're right. As I think educating ourselves on and having this open discussion here where we talk about these issues, and because of the nature of the task force, you know, Amber bringing up Arizona is not a point of contact state. I think that's important. Might not be front of mind for everyone in this room. So,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, permit to purchase piece, which goes to what Amber said. Permit to purchase requires a different paradigm in terms of how we do NICS. And I mean, Amber's right. You need a whole unit. That the state probably need a ton of people to kind of do this with the volume of weapons that are bought in Arizona. So
you don't need to wait for breaks. If you have a question or a comment, we ask that so we avoid chaos. Use the raise your hand feature, and we'll acknowledge you. Shall we move on?
Yeah, so the next 4 slides here are just what I've talked about. Here's the peer-reviewed evidence for each one of these points that I've made and available, so that you have them if you want to take a look through them. I've read through every single one of them, and they'll drive you completely mad nuts. So this is where we get into discussion. We want to talk about what's going on with existing projects out there, updates. So this is a time where where are we with this? So with mental health pickup orders in AZ Point, and again, I've taken a sabbatical, so I'm on the catch up. Where are we with mental health pickup orders in AZ Point? Have we discussed it at all with folks? And just chime in where you want to. So. Okay, so if you're on mute, you just unmute yourself and speak up. Go ahead. Armando.
You need to unmute Armando. And go ahead.
Yeah, this is Armando. I work in Pima County with adult mental health, and I know the AZ Point system as well. And I have not heard any peep on the mental health orders in AZ Point. That would actually help out the law enforcement if we could get it going.
David, go ahead.
Hi, yes, I'm Dave Tasker. I'm with AOC. I've only been with the agency here.
Can't hear you, David. Speak up.
Oh, my apologies. I'm here with, I work at AOC. I've only been with the agency here for a couple months. I'm not aware of any status on this project. However, I'd be happy to look into this and sort of report back and see where we're at on this.
Okay, so David, you're at the AOC, huh?
Yes, sir. Yeah, like I said, I've only been here for a couple months. This is my first meeting with you guys. But yeah, I'd be happy to look into this and at least report back to you as far as where we're at on the status.
That's perfect.
What is your role at AOC, David?
I'm a court policy analyst. I'm with the court programs unit. There's another analyst in my unit who actually works on AZ Point. So I know who to talk to, and like I said, I can get you guys an answer on this fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think in the past, and this has been a big Jason from TPD has been a big proponent of this in terms of how mental health pickup orders have been issued, and but they're not in any system anywhere, so they'd like to be tracked. I guess we can go through this again. It's been a couple years since we talked about this in a task force meeting, but this is something that we can bring back up again.
So we're going to volunteer David to be a part of this. Sorry, Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, as far as my remembrance, I thought Mark had said that it had been built to do it when the system was built. But I remember he said, if I'm building, I'm going to build it to do this. I just think I don't know what's the other requirements, whether it's the feeds from the courts or whatever that need to be done or the programming, but I'm pretty sure he said the architecture on the back end could handle it if it was decided to do it.
Yes, that was discussed. And good.
Amber, then Paul.
Hi, neither myself, Melanie, or Veronica remember this, and it touches our system. Can we get a real quick reminder of what this is?
Yeah, you guys don't remember talking about this?
Nope.
Okay.
Lloyd, it's Paul. I remember this was a talking point in one of the meetings at ACJC where we discussed this. I believe there was a representative from AOC who was in the room. I cannot remember the speaker's name, but she had mentioned that there was an issue. If we look back in the minutes, I think there will be information there that talks about what the issues were seen from AOC's side.
Yeah. Okay.
Amber, this is Andy. Are you asking for just a more kind of a description of what we're talking about?
Right, because we obviously know that AZ Point is the system that passes the protection orders, and we know we have mental health coming from the courts. But I don't remember us ever having a conversation of them joining together and doing anything. And I don't remember anything about pickup orders because the current mental health says do not detain or pick up solely on this order.
Right.
To Lloyd or I guess Lloyd more so, can you maybe give just a couple minutes on the thought of the system and how it would be beneficial to law enforcement if it was, I think the information was basically flowed the same way.
Again, yeah, the the bottom line was, how do we make this visible? How do we improve or reduce some of the traction or some of the challenges in communicating this? There were, when we met in Tucson in our last task force meeting, a lot of unresolved issues were raised, including coverage by the courts, the challenges that law enforcement face in actually accomplishing some of these pickups, the coordination of services. We had a presentation by the Tucson folks on what they're doing and how they're coordinating pickup orders. At that time, it didn't seem scalable to other departments that maybe have different staffing or different capacities. So the big idea was looking at the AZ Point infrastructure and the back end infrastructure to see if that could be used to manage mental health pickup orders. I think like
The service portion,
their policies and sort of further discussion, the costs of it still haven't been worked out. So I think some of the background still needs to be, I think, a working group to really re-engage. And part of this, can I say come to Jesus here?
Yeah.
Part of this is we need to, if this is an important issue for the task force, and we want to move forward with this and start addressing some of the challenges that we know exist, do we want to convene working groups and put some meat to this, or are we at a holding point and maybe move this off our priority list or our task list? So
Yep. Exactly.
So technically there is an opportunity to do it. That doesn't mean the policies and the technology has been resolved. We have good examples of how this could possibly work and support work as presented in the Tucson piece, but whether that's replicable statewide, I think is still at issue. And of course, the challenges of doing an AZ Point type thing for mental health pickup orders over the next few years, that's a daunting task as well. So is there a path forward? And I think maybe reconvening a group, if we feel that this is still an important topic, to start trailblazing that path and putting all these sort of smaller pieces together would be one option.
Yeah, Jason Winsky at TPD, I think they have a joint mental health response team. He's talked about this at length, as Lloyd said, and Tucson presented this. It's using the back end to keep track of it. I think there's also a standardization issue, in terms of the mental health pickup orders being standardized across the state in terms of what they look like. And then from the AOC standpoint, it would be, how do you take that and actually capture it through a system and then put it on the AZ Point dashboard so that one, it's visible, and two, that you can track these things, because they're just not, it's agency by agency that's doing them.
So Tony, is this the part of the agenda where we ask for leadership from the task force to step up to participate in working groups?
Yeah, it is. With this one, I think that we need to get a little bit more informed. So I think that we touch base with Jason once again and maybe have him give a presentation of what the issues are so that we can fully flush this out again. And, you know, and think about what potential systems it could, besides AZ Point, you know, how does it implicate DPS in terms of visibility out there? So we need to kind of flush all those things out so that we know first before it's important. I know Phoenix PD, being the two largest agencies, probably could, if we bring that together, we can kind of get an idea of what mental health pickup orders are looking like.
Okay, so David, we'll follow up with you maybe between now and our next task force meeting up in Flagstaff. We'll do some background and see what we can report back to the group.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. The next topic is ADRS usage and FDR. And I know that, you know, when I left, that ADRS use was on the dramatic upswing. Are we still on that trajectory of getting folks using ADRS across the state?
I guess that's me. Yes. So as of last year, we had 50% of our dispositions reported through ADRS. So that was really good, but we're bringing on new agencies every day. As I told Matt last week, DPS is now hosting training twice a month, actually 3 times a month, to tell people how to report FDRs, how to do corrections, how to do appropriate arrest records without errors, and demonstrating ADRS. And then once a month, we're doing an online tutorial of how to use ADRS and having people see it in real time with what it does. So we're getting really good feedback. And then Shayla's been really involved in getting the XML schemas from different attorneys' offices online. So we are moving in the right direction with it. This kind of touches back to your first comment about paperless. We are getting agencies to go paperless at this point with ADRS. Maricopa County Attorney, Superior Court, Yavapai County Attorney are just some examples of completely paperless agencies. And we're auditing a few other ones right now to see who else can go paperless. So anybody who's interested can just email adrs@azdps.gov to get the web version, which is free. And it's a real-time feed to the CCH rap sheet.
Great. So what we need to do is just help promote getting them to you to get that done.
Exactly, because we've also enhanced the system quite a bit. So for example, I know that Julie Alquist's team is on here. If the sheriff's department makes an error when they're booking somebody for another local jurisdiction, the sheriff's department can fix those errors rather than asking the police department to ask DPS to fix the errors. The sheriff's department can fix them. The police departments can fix a lot of errors. And it's moving a lot better for everybody. They can go in and add charges, change charges, add domestic violence flags. All things that would have been a paper process to ask DPS to fix in the past can now also be done in there.
Perfect. Yeah, I think the last you had Yuma. Was Yuma one of your first ones to get?
Yuma has been paperless for a couple of years now. Yuma Police Department, their Superior Court in some of the cities are on there. We just recently got Phoenix PD on there, which is obviously a massive agency. We're working with Mojave really well right now. Pinal, we've had a couple of conversations with Pinal and walking through their stuff. Pima had an online tutorial last week. So it's getting out there. The word's moving along. Apache Junction's on there. They're not paperless yet, but they're on there. So
that's perfect. I mean, I think for us, for a task force, it is, you know, what can we do in order to push more people to you and getting the word out? So I think we just, whenever we're having a meeting, to hammer on that in terms of the commission.
Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, just give everybody an update. So if you remember, Amber had mentioned getting the county attorney's offices direct feeded into this criminal history system. And we had been provided some funding from the governor's office to do that. That is The vast majority of the unexpended funding is on the table as far as the budget deficit reduction tool by the governor's office, that they're looking to scrape that back. So, and I think in conversations with Lloyd and his team that we've hit and gotten the agreements out of all of the county attorney's offices that we're going to probably be able to do that without it being a mandate at this point. But it's been a really good opportunity to get those offices that were interested and willing to do that project and get them on board. And I think it's made a big difference, but we'll probably be putting that portion of it to bed here in the next couple of months.
Wow. Okay, good. Boy, that's really good news. Good news. Good work, Amber. Okay, e-warrants. How are we with e-warrants? Okay, another question. Go ahead.
Kathy, go ahead. You're muted. Kathy, you're muted. If you, there you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. I think I'm the only one here talking about e-warrants. Scott asked me to join this morning, Lloyd. I hope that's okay. He had a conflict with some deployments.
Yes,
I
that's
don't
fine.
see Suzanne or Leon on, so okay. First of all, the statistics for the courts and the law enforcement agencies that are participating right now are really, really good. We've got 15 courts that are live. I've got 6 on deck with the corresponding law enforcement agencies ready to go and completing training and doing the go live meetings. So that'll be over 20. And then we've got about 5 or 6 more that we're talking with now that are already in production in JWI, and they're interested in going forward with e-warrants. And some of them are really interested in even coming on with JWI just because they can do e-warrants. So it's been going really well. All the courts and the law enforcement agencies that are participating in e-warrants really, really, really like it. So it just makes it a lot easier for them. They get immediate information. It's really helpful for officer safety because immediately you know whether there's an active warrant or not. So I think we've been doing warrants for maybe 4 years now after the pilot, and we really appreciate the support from ACJC that's made that possible. We have another project to enhance the e-warrant system, and that's been going pretty well too. We have 3 tasks. One was the true-up warrant, the warrant true-up. So we actually are almost complete with that task. We analyze the DPS warrant file and the Ajax warrant file. We produce warrant reports every month where the courts that are on e-warrants and law enforcement agencies don't have to go through a manual process. They actually get a report right now in terms of what's still active, what isn't active. It's saving everyone a lot of time. And so that's really a lot of new law enforcement agencies are contacting us. Just they want to get on e-warrants just so that the warrant true-up process will work more smoothly for them. So we still have a couple of things to do on that, Lloyd. I think we're designing an event to inform the court about locates and other things in NCIC. So that's kind of still under development, but the actual true up part in terms of the analysis between the Ajax warrants and the DPS warrants, that's complete, and the reports are going out monthly.
Great.
Editing the warrant without quash was a really big one in terms of requirements. We've had meetings with stakeholders, really surprised me in terms of some of the business requirements that I wasn't expecting. But anyway, we're kind of in the middle of design on that. And a lot of that is because of the changes we've got to make in the Ajax system. It's easier on the Justice Web Interface side for the development, but Ajax has a lot of really complex builds and a very complex build schedule. So I think we're targeting development, Lloyd, for the July build in terms of the editing the warrant without quash. So that's where we're at. We can make the changes more quickly on the JWI side. So I think we're targeting development for May.
But there is a path forward on that.
I'm sorry?
There is a solution for that.
Yeah. We've done requirements and we're just kind of finalizing the design, and then development is going to start. So absolutely. And then the third task was the type of agency, to really define whether it's an originating agency or a processing agency. We're still kind of in requirements on that. We've talked in circles a few times, and I think we need a little more stakeholder involvement. We have a new agency that's just been deployed to production, Tolleson Police Department, and El Mirage actually goes through the same interface through Tolleson. And so Tolleson processes the warrants for El Mirage, just like we have the same situation in Coconino County. So we're kind of working through the requirements still on that. That development will be really quick because we're not going to have to do much on the Ajax system. It's just in JWI. So that's where we're at. Moving forward on enhancements, thinking about more enhancements. We always have a kind of a checklist in terms of things that come up. Every time we deploy a new set of agencies, police department and courts, they always come up with new ideas that we haven't heard from others. So as we get experience with deployment, we come up with, better ideas and ways to really improve the whole process.
Yeah, I think Amber and AOC can attest that the more you feed us, the more hungrier we get.
Amber's been a big help on this too. We always count on her to give us the DPS point of their perspective, and she's really great in terms of participating in all our stakeholder meetings whenever we need her. So we really appreciate that.
Great.
I can also speak on conditions of release if there's no one else here, just in terms of we had a meeting, Scott and I had a meeting with Michelle Gillick from the court, and I believe it's Sherrod, and I'm sorry, I don't remember his last name, but we're actually working on a level of effort, a statement of work to help with the conditions of release. So that's just in the early stage. We haven't even submitted that yet.
Okay. Is Michelle on? Okay. No, we did have a meeting with DPS and AOC on conditions of release, and I thought it was a great conversation in terms of where we are and what we're doing, and that I think the bottom line is that conditions of release is coming. It will be available to law enforcement, but not available kind of out on the street. That's down the road, a ways in terms of having it actually available to law enforcement on the street. But the bottom line is that will be available to really all criminal justice folks. At their office level. So you'd be able to come back to the office and check on conditions of release. Usually if you have somebody in custody, so for some other reason, hopefully some other reason.
We can provide more clarification at the Flagstaff Summit. Where we are now is we are working with AOC to unlock that data and make it visible. So we are capturing conditions of release from all courts, and they will create a file or a way of making that available. Connecting into that, what policies and rules on the use of that is still being worked out. And there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done there. But we are getting to the point where what was unavailable previously, we're now going to be able to put it in some sort of file, a lookup file, that will be visible to criminal justice agencies. That was a key hurdle that we were able to overcome. With that now being available, comes the hard work of determining what we do with that, how we use that, what's the benefits of that. So that requires a lot more work, and don't want to say that this has been resolved, but we were able to make a big step forward in increasing the visibility of conditions of release, and solving that problem. So as we move forward, we'll work with the different stakeholder groups to see how, now that this is available, what is available, how do we want to best use that to serve our state.
Okay. Do we have any other existing projects that I did not mention, Lloyd? We didn't put on the slide.
Task force projects. Oh, you're putting me on the spot. Well, the ongoing, juvenile delinquent reporting, the mental health. We'll talk about that as we unfold the data piece. But active projects, no, I don't think so. We are completing the final updates to AZ Point. There's a few more sort of internal tweaks that they're working on, but that should be completed, I think, by the time we roll out in Flagstaff. But the back end has been completely updated, and it's working pretty well, I think. Would you agree, Paul, or have we improved AZ Point to now where it's usable? I'm putting him on the spot. Okay, he's not saying anything. No. I guess he agrees.
I was trying to find the unmute button. I apologize. I moved from my phone to my desktop. I would say that yes, Lloyd, you have and the team at ACJC and at AOC have vastly improved the operation. The experience on this side of it has, it would sound mean if I said night and day, but that's exactly what it is. It's easy to work with. My staff has nothing but compliments with regard to it. And I think most people know that we got impacted pretty severely when that statute changed and AZ Point came along. The numbers are exponential for us. And so improvements in that system developed efficiencies for us to be able to serve our customers. And so many props and thanks to the team.
Thank you. Tony?
Great. Okay, next slide. All right, effectiveness in programs. This is where we get into talking about a little bit about, okay, now we need to see how we're doing. We need to deter, like, and I'll start from the beginning. Mental health determinations to NICS. Are we capturing everything? I kind of vaguely, when I was on sabbatical, I did check in and listen to the last meeting. Are we? I think I may have heard some questions if we're capturing all our mental health determinations in the state. I don't know if anyone can answer that question for us that's on the line, that's on this meeting. Okay. Well, speak up if you do.
Hey, Tony, this is Andy. Just as a reminder, we don't capture every one of them into NICS. Only those that are required under law.
Right. Armando.
Anthony, this is Armando. The only time Pima County sends to NICS for mental health is when there's a hearing.
But are we capturing all of the state? Is everyone reporting in those determinations that qualify to be reported to NICS? Are we capturing all of them?
I couldn't answer that, but I do know Pima County is.
Okay. That's something we need to explain. I heard a little bit, I heard, and I may have misheard, but we just want to make sure that we've got everything. Now that we have it, are we actually capturing everything? We don't have any more holes in the system. Okay, so we'll get back on that, but that's a question in terms of effectiveness.
Now, remind me, it is the courts that are reporting this, right? Not law enforcement.
Correct.
So the court's determination. David, I wonder if this is something we could add to your task list at AOC to maybe check in on and see how we're doing with the Ajax courts and the other courts.
I'd be happy to look into it.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Okay, 2FID gap. Have we eliminated gap? I think we have, but how's the 2FID thing going?
Is that me again?
Is it you?
I don't even know. I don't know how the 2FID project is going. Joe's not here, but we have created and approved a rugged tablet that can be put in the courtroom so that the court personnel can fingerprint the defendant rather than sending them to the arresting agency at a later date and time, which slows down the case. So anybody who's interested in that, that's been tested for about a year now and is out there live. As far as the gap, I don't know that we'll ever close the gap, but we have eliminated the gap at DOC thanks to work from Jennifer Abbott's before she left.
Yeah.
DOC now checks the subject before they're transported to see if they have an arrest. And then they tell the sheriff's department to fingerprint them before transportation. So that has closed the gap of at least ensuring they have a state identification number for that event or an event. But things seem to be getting slightly better. I think the legislation we put out 2 years ago based on the Auditor General's report against DPS, changing 411750 to include more statutes, has really hurt a lot of courts, and we're sorry for that, but it was kind of mandated upon us. But that's where the rugged tablet really comes into place to let those agencies do that. And we have troopers, typically sergeants in the field, that also have like a cell phone tablet or a cell phone or a tablet that's rugged that they can capture fingerprints in the field now. So that's also available to agencies that want it.
Good. So the law that came, the audit, what was the audit again? What happened with the audit?
So DPS was audited by the Auditor General, and they haven't closed the audit yet, but their findings against DPS was that we were in violation of 411750, stating that we were not allowed to collect anything other than felonies, DUI, sex offenses, and domestic violence. And then in another section of the audit, they found that DPS was in violation of 411750 by not collecting all arrest information. So we said, we can't do both. I can't not collect it and collect it. So their recommendation was that the legislature change the law to match our licensing unit statutes. Every time one of them changed, they wanted 411750 to change, but that particular statute changes every quarter or every semester. So we were like, we'll always be chasing the law if we change it every time we get a new clearance card unit or clearance card license. So we wrote the clearance card law into our law. So every time that those particular statutes for licenses change, 4117 adapts to it automatically.
Okay.
It requires that anybody who's charged with a crime that they shouldn't be working with a vulnerable person, that crime has to be reported to us. So what I've been telling agencies is if you don't want the person you're arresting to work with your family member, like a child or a vulnerable parent, then tell us about their arrest so that they won't get that clearance card.
Okay.
Amber, Tony, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Matt Bileski with ACJC. I just had a quick question about the 2FID. Is that still pulling up the ARN check, or does it become more specific to the charges at hand, the PCNs, or are we still looking at the ARN check?
You're still only looking at the ARN check. We haven't found a way to pull from the PCN incident level because some people have 50 or 60 PCNs. And I don't know how a clerk of the court would be able to identify that it was the event they had unless they had access to a rap sheet. And a lot of the courts don't want access to our rap sheets. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's pretty positive, results. I mean, but you're still working on refining that as you go, right?
Right. It's an everyday, all day thing.
Yeah.
One thing that I don't know if you know this or not, Tony, because you've been away for a little while, but one thing that they've made capable is the tablets and the cell phone. There's kind of cell phone kind of device that the officers can take fingerprints on. Those also do mug photos at the same time so that they can capture those photos for us to help our facial recognition. We do iris now, so it also captures the eyes, and we have a tattoo database. So we're doing a lot to kind of build this Arizona database for all of our biometrics.
Perfect. Great. Okay. I think that, and I know that you said the gap will never be eliminated, but at least from the DOC, did I say that right? Department of Corrections standpoint, Jennifer Abbott's side, they just kind of moved it back one step, right? We're not accepting them if they don't come with a fingerprint.
Correct. So when they're notified that a subject has been sentenced to prison time, they do a search to find out if the subject has fingerprints. And then they notify the sheriff's department or DPS and ask that the subject be fingerprinted before transportation. Okay.
So really the whole thing now is just promoting the FID to get, more. Well, you guys are doing that. So that's cool. Perfect. All right. Arrest warrant standardization. I know this is an old topic. Have we standardized on an arrest warrant, or is that still hanging out there? Does anyone know?
So I don't know what you guys can do to help with this. So they're standardized, but people don't understand why they're standardized, if that makes sense. So while the warrant may say like rule warrant, print type is a print type 04, the reasoning behind that has fallen away. And so when it gets to the jail or to the booking agency, they don't read the top of it. They just go straight to the charge section that shows what the FTA is on, and they recharge. So as we talk to people, we're telling them read the top, see what it says about being a rule warrant or print type 01 or 4. But maybe some communication from you guys would remind the newer generation of what the purpose of that is.
Good. Okay. So we need to promote more, read the instructions. Okay, got it. Okay.
Norma writes, I wish those warrants, oops, I lost it. I wish those warrants would provide the original report from the original law enforcement agency. Do you want to say more about that, Norma?
Amber, do you want to comment on that?
I think what she's talking about is when the warrants are issued, they don't have the DR number or the arresting agency that initiated the original stop or reason for contact. So, for example, if it's Phoenix PD arrests somebody today for domestic violence and then the subject fails to appear, when the new warrant is issued for that FTA, it doesn't refer back to that being speedy case is what I believe she's talking about.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Okay, juvenile delinquent reporting to NICS. I did not get a chance to talk to Joe Kelroy. David, if you could talk to Joe and see if we are doing juvenile delinquent reporting records to NICS.
And my apologies, Joe, what was his last name?
Joe Kelroy,
Okay,
head
will
of
do.
the juvenile section at AOC. Kathy, save us.
My understanding is that we are actually submitting and have been for about the past year. So I know that was a big effort that was done in juvenile here at the AOC. I can certainly confirm that with Joe, but from when I last talked to him about it, they took that action within the last year.
Yeah, I knew it was imminent. I've just been gone too long to
Yeah.
follow up on it. Amber, is DPS involved in that in term at all?
We have been involved in the conversation. And I had asked for some examples and was sent some, but I could never see them. And that's kind of where it died on my end. So Kathy, if you could send me an example of somebody you know was in there, because we've never actually seen it work on our side.
Okay.
Sure. I can follow up with the juvenile division and see what they can give us.
Thank you, because right now we have a huge burden on us. I don't know how many of you know, but I think it was in 2023, the federal law changed when Biden took place and stated that anyone under the age of 21 had to have a background check for, or anybody under the age of 21 had to have a background check to see if they've ever been arrested under the age of 18. So anybody now that tries to buy a gun, we have to do a background check under the age of 18. So we worked with AOC, so we have access to the AOC juvenile court system to do a name and date of birth search. But that's adding about 30 to 40 requests on us per day. So it's putting a lot of extra work on us. So if the juvenile delinquents was reporting and we could see that, then we could tell the FBI that it was being reported to them.
Okay, so Amber, you need an example. Tell us what you need, and we'll.
I just need like a couple of names and dates of birth of juveniles that they know are in the system that are supposed to be being displayed, so I can see if it's there.
Okay.
Because I've never on a once and warrants check or a juvenile check. JOLTS isn't really used anymore. I don't know if they're putting it in LEAP. I don't use LEAP. So just kind of where you're putting it and what it looks like so I could kind of get an example.
Okay.
Thank you.
So who's taking care of that? Who said okay?
That was Kathy.
Okay, Kathy. Thanks, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it'd be nice to close that out. Okay. All right. Now we get to the big one. Allison, are you ready?
I'll stop presenting. Allison, you can launch yours.
We've been talking now that we have AZ Point. Now we need to look at what's behind. Is AZ Point, other than being a very efficient system for criminal justice agencies, what are we seeing in it? Are there trends? Are there things we really need to take a deep dive into AZ Point now that we're collecting this data and see where what we got, what policies or what kind of changes or efficiencies can we now recommend in terms of the system? What are we learning from AZ Point? So that's the segue to, I think one thing they find is surprising.
Slides, I have it available.
Oh, I have them. I can put them up.
Yeah, the slides?
Yeah.
Oh, wrong one.
Yep, wrong one.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
Paul?
No, yeah, Allison, you need to probably turn yourself up a little bit more.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot more.
While you do that, Paul, did you have a quick question?
Yes, there was a slight question. Well, what are we seeing? I have the question, what are we not seeing? And that is the newer lifetime no contact injunctions that are issued by the courts. They're not an easy point. I know is dealing with them on another matter about validation, but I'm just curious as to whether those have a place in AZ Point or not. If we're having orders of protection and injunctions against harassment and injunction against workplace harassment, this seems like this would be the appropriate place to house those. I wasn't involved, obviously, to be knowledgeable about how that was organized with the courts that would be issuing these, but it seems like from a law enforcement standpoint, if we're looking for protective orders and they're in AZ Point, then this one should be in there as well.
Amber, you had a response?
So when that law passed, the onus was put on DPS to be the entering agency. We did request for them to be put in AZ Point, and we were told by AOC that that was not going to happen because it's a criminal case, not a civil case. DPS does agree with you, Paul, that it needs to be an AZ Point.
Well, that's a good conversation. They do stem from criminal cases. However, they straddle both the criminal orders and civil orders. And so I believe that they belong there.
I agree. And initially they said that it's because it was going to show up on the rap sheet, which is not true. So I was like, that's not how that works. So I completely agree with you, Paul.
Wow, that's kind of a big issue. We need to really see it in AZ Point.
We'll add that to our list. Dr.
Yeah.
Hogan, are you ready to go?
I'm ready. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes. They'll speak up just a little bit more, but I think you're much better. Go ahead.
I will project as loud as possible. Okay, so we here at the Statistical Analysis Center at ACJC took a look at some of the data that we have available now in the AZ Point system, specifically related to the Brady prohibitions that are or are not indicated in the orders of protection that we have. So we're specifically looking at data through 2022 that we had available. So first few years of data that we have in AZ Point. It's a lot of data that we have, about over 172,000 rows of data. And I'm kind of going to walk through what all of this data is, because it gets a little complicated. And I think it's important for everyone to kind of understand what we're looking at, because the data analysis here, I want everyone to understand, because we're going to ask you what you guys want us to look at. So just kind of understanding the intricacies here, I think, is important for you guys to make an informed decision on what direction we go next. So that's kind of why I'm kind of stepping through what all of this means. So there's over 172,000 rows of data here. Each row basically represents each time an order is touched or processed. So every time an order is issued or modified or transferred to another court is basically a row of data in our database. So when we kind of clean all of that up, what we are left with is this is through to the 2022 again, is almost 98,000 unique case numbers. Okay, so Again, this is a snapshot in time, so this isn't up to date what we have now, but just to kind of give you some sort of sense of, we start with over 170,000 and we end up with about 98,000 unique case numbers. And these represent an actual unique individual orders, okay? So now I just kind of want to walk through an example case here to just kind of give you a flavor of what we're looking at when we are going through this data. So this is just dummy data or a dummy case, but sort of based on a real case that we would see in AZ Point. So an order is issued on July 15th. At that point in time, the Brady prohibition is not indicated by the judge that hears that order. On July 19th, the order is brought before a judge again, and it's modified. Once again, it could be a different judge, it could be the same judge, but once again, the Brady prohibition is not indicated at that time. We see that the following week, the order is once again modified. We have, at this point, given the data that ACJC has access to, all we know is that at that point in time, the order was modified and the Brady prohibition was checked, yes, was indicated at that point in time. The next line of data that we have is almost a month later in August of 2022, and we know that the order was served with Brady indicated. So what we're looking at now is that almost 98,000 individual orders that we have in our sample here at some point in time. So at some point, and this would be 4 lines of data in our case, at some point in time, Brady was indicated. And what we have here is a little over 2,000 cases where Brady was indicated at some point in time. So that means in about 2% of orders, we have a Brady prohibition being indicated at some point in time. Okay, so it is a little tricky. We can look at how many times, how many individual orders Brady has been indicated, but it might be the order was modified to include Brady, but then the actual order that was served didn't have a Brady indicator. So if we want to just look at the final order that was served, whether or not that has Brady indicated, that would be a different question. So just kind of keep those kind of things in mind when we have a discussion about, what next steps might be. Okay, so kind of taking a step back, again, looking in the entire AZ Point database that we have through 2022, there are a total of 147 individual courts that have heard at least one order of protection case. So 147 courts have had an order of protection go through their court and are entered into AZ Point. 54 of those courts, which accounts for about 37%, have not issued a Brady prohibition on a protective order ever. Okay, so that's about 37%. However, it's important to note that in the entire population of protective order cases, that only accounts for about 10% of cases. So while 37% have never issued a Brady prohibition, they're only seeing about 10% of all protective order cases, right? 147 courts, but there's a wide range of how many cases these courts are seeing because, as everyone knows, Arizona is made up of some very rural areas and some much more populous areas. So we have an entire range of courts that we're looking at here. So out of those 147 courts, we then also have 93 that have issued at least one Brady prohibition on a protective order. That's about 63% of those courts. These courts, of course, on the flip side, make up for about 90% of all protective order cases. So this makes sense. The majority of our protective order cases are making up the majority of the Brady prohibitions that we're seeing. So I'm going to show you this in a visualization. And when my team and I looked at this data, we wanted to be very cautious because we do have such a range of courts that see a very wide volume of protective order cases. We wanted to be very careful about comparing courts of like sizes in terms of the amount of protective order cases that they are seeing. So when you see group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4, these are broken up. These are groups of courts, and they're broken up by the volume of protective order cases that they see in AZ Point. So a court is only being compared to other courts that see similar volume of cases. So what's interesting here is I'm sure you can see that all 4 groups have a very similar pattern in terms of the number of Brady prohibitions that they are issuing. So what you're seeing here, the bar charts are the number of Brady prohibitions that the courts are issuing. So this isn't by the size or by the size of court. This is basically the number of Brady prohibitions they're issuing. I want you to pay close attention, though, too. It's a little misleading because the axis, right, the numbers here that we're looking at on the left-hand side are very different. So here in our low volume court, the maximum number of Brady issued was 6. This is 6 total cases. And I believe the total volume that we're looking at here is the largest is 119 prohibition cases, protective order cases, excuse me. So this low volume ranges from like 1 to 119 total protective order cases, and the court that would have issued the most issued 6. Then you look down here at the high volume and you see that the scale is much different. Lloyd, do you have a question?
What is the X?
This is number of Brady prohibitions issued. And this is by court.
By court. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So this is individual courts. So then here in group 4, so this would be our high volume courts. So these are the courts that are seeing a large volume of protective order cases. You can see our scale is much different. So 25 all the way up to about 150 Brady prohibitions that we're looking at. But interestingly, even though the scales are very different in terms of the number of issues being, number of prohibitions being issued, the pattern is very similar, right? So we have a small number of courts being responsible for a significant chunk of the Brady prohibitions being issued in each group. So it's a pretty interesting, finding. And again, we just really wanted to be cautious that we're only comparing courts of similar volume just because the range is, from tens of cases to tens of thousands of cases. So, comparing these groups to each other would just not be a fair comparison. Okay, so just to kind of sum all this together and to give you guys just a little bit more information to kind of wrap all of this up. 2% of orders statewide had a Brady prohibition at some point in the case's processing. Some protective orders are basically issued and served and never touched again. Some have multiple lines where they're issued, modified, expired, issued, superseded, but at some point did or did not have a Brady prohibition indicated. So about 2% of orders at some point have had a Brady prohibition. About 37 courts statewide have not issued a Brady prohibition, but they only make up about 10% of all of our protective order cases. So something that we can look at. We don't really have any insight at this point about why, the prohibitions change in those cases where they do move back and forth. But that is something that we could take a look at. And then when we're looking at the 5 courts that have issued the most Brady prohibitions, Those courts account for almost 35% of all Brady prohibitions issued in AZ Point. So this kind of goes back to that pattern that that we were pointing out, where, you know, in each of those four charts, the pattern was that a few courts were kind of making up the most Brady prohibitions issued in each of those four quadrants, or in each of those four charts. So the 5 courts that have issued the most Brady prohibitions are really accounting for a little over a third of all of the prohibitions issued in AZ Point through 2022. So that is what we have looked at so far. We kind of just wanted to stop there because there are multiple different ways we could take this analysis, and really just wanted to hear your feedback, the task force feedback, and direction on the most useful way you think we could take this analysis.
So that throws it out there to what would you like to see in this analysis? We open it up. Kathy.
Yeah, I just have a question, Allison. What was the goal or thought in this analysis? What were you attempting to try to identify?
Really, this was just kind of our first crack at seeing what the rate and distribution of how often and like the distribution of Brady prohibitions in protective orders. So there really wasn't any, you know, real research question at this point. It was just a first kind of glance at what data we had and what kind of questions we might be able to answer with it.
So I'm just trying to make sure that there's not some sort of assumption that perhaps the courts aren't properly indicating that Brady. You're just looking at the interesting data in relation to really it's more about volume of both, to me, both two things. Both the volume of the number of requests for protective orders as well as those that are requesting hearings, right? So that's really all this is telling us specifically, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and really, you know, there is more data, I think, available on in the actual order of request for the order of protection. And we just really have, was Brady indicated, yes or no? And so absolutely, you're right. This was really just a first, you know, how often is it indicated compared to the volume of protective orders, and looking at that in terms of how many cases each court is seeing. Yeah, I mean, we, you know, have really no idea in terms of, you know, when, or like I said, you know, if it's modified or superseded, we have no idea why that's happening, or you know, for what reasons, if you know, if you know, court was changed, or the judge was changed, or the order itself was changed. So those are, you know, all kind of up in the air. This was really just a first, what do we have here, to look at what data we have available.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but Kathy, one of the questions out there is if we had, and this is off the top of my head, if we looked at petitions on the petition side from the plaintiff, and the plaintiff mentioned a firearm or fear of a firearm or something in the plaintiff piece, and we see a percentage, say like 25% on the plaintiff side, you know, mentioned a firearm or something about a firearm, and then we see this translate out to 2% in the order, although it doesn't tell us what happened in the middle. Isn't that, I'm wondering if that's worth researching, how that kind of translates over. How is it flowing through the process? And I'm just wondering if that, you know, and Andy's right. Can you get down to the court level? And I'm wondering if it becomes a training issue or a policy issue? I mean, there's all types of things here that I just think that, but we got to be, you know,
I should
careful as we go down the path to make sure that everyone's okay with looking at certain data elements and making us, making some type of hypothesis out of it.
I should state that the Brady prohibition question originated from staff. And it was as we looked at reporting to our funders, beyond the efficiencies, reduction of time to reporting these indicators to NICS, what other performance measures, and in particular Brady domestic violence data that are used by analysts to determine whether or not to allow a sale or a purchase. What are we capturing data? If we are capturing data, what can we know about what we're capturing and presenting to analysts for their review? So it wasn't, I think Tony raised an interesting question about, going deeper at, about do we need to do more education or do other things? That might be questions that the field might generate. I know for staff, it was really about the impact that we're having on collecting key indicators that could be used by the NICS system. So I just want to clarify that piece. Paul?
Just a point of clarification that I'm looking for. When you speak to Brady prohibitions, are we talking about where there's a hearing for Brady to be implicated, or are we talking about when the judge checks the Arizona firearms section as a condition of the order?
Yeah.
Allison, could you explain the data point that you were looking at?
I believe it's the check of the box on the order itself that the judge indicates.
Thank you.
So yeah, we just have a yes or no, basically.
And I just want to add from ACJC's perspective, it was an interesting exercise to review how that indicator processes through the life course of the protection order. And that, as Allison had pointed out, in certain instances, we do see the indicator initially at the origination of that protection order, but that can evolve. That can evolve over the life course of that protection order until served. So how we navigate through that part of it too, that was definitely a lesson learned in this effort to try to bring together some precursory data and information to all of you. So just something to keep in mind as well that I particularly noticed as we're talking through this in the process of getting those protection orders through AZ Point and beyond.
Amber, go ahead.
So Matt, you bring up a good point. If it's 5% of the courts issuing the majority of these, and a lot of them start out with the box saying yes, are we positive there's not a programming issue that's not changing the box itself, which we've seen in other programs?
Great question, Amber. That might be something we want to dig a little deeper on. And if that's something that the task force is interested in, we can coordinate with AOC and navigate through that to understand more.
Yeah, just the thought here, we have a system, and we have a system that we can analyze and really look at, again, in the big picture piece, of following out to actual, does this program actually reduce the amount of gun violence or gun related injuries or whatever. You can see we can almost map this to, crime information, or, by area code or by court jurisdiction. And so you can see where, okay, we have no Brady prohibitions in this court, and this is just theoretically talking. We have no gun, we have little gun violence issues in this area. Well, that's understandable. But if you have nothing coming out of the courts, but yet you have a high rate of gun violence, especially against women in domestic violence situations, it could inform, kind of a deeper look in terms of what's going on. But that's all has to be informed by the task force through a bunch of people coming up with, okay, is it okay to go down this path, or let's look at this. There has to be agreement on what we look at and what the purpose is.
I also want to caution Tony. I think that's an interesting question for down the road. The data is not clean, right? We will be very responsible in our analysis and in our presentation of the data. We don't want, and I don't think we have good enough data to start making these types of
correct,
comparisons between jurisdictions, comparisons between areas yet. So I want to make sure that people are not taking that away from this presentation, but to let them know that there are data. The data is useful, but not always perfect, right? And so we want to caution the types of takeaways that we can make. Andy, and then maybe Allison, you can talk a little bit more about the protections that we're putting in place.
Yeah. I mean, I think to me, the interesting question is going to be, again, when you see this high concentration of orders being done in one or a small number of courts, why? What is that? What's the reasoning for that? And, again, is it being done appropriately, or some judges more inclined than others to start the process at that point? I'm going to default to the Brady versus, again, not saying it is or isn't warranted, but, because to me, then you begin to, if that becomes information that can be gleaned out of this at some point, then you begin to have this issue where you could say, are people judge shopping in the sense that they know if they go to this judge at this time, there's going to be a greater likelihood they're going to get the Brady prohibition? Because, I mean, let's be honest, we're a gun-rich state and we like our firearms, and the Second Amendment is what it is, and that is a constitutionally protected right. So I want to make sure that if we see an issue, that we're able to understand why it's an issue and what we can do about it. Is it a training issue? Is it things like that? So that it's being done consistently and appropriately across the state when we're utilizing it. So I think there's great potential for what we can look at here. And I just want to make sure we're looking at it from a very balanced standpoint of let's understand what's going on before we try and say something is good or bad and how it's being implemented.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate everyone's feedback and the discourse here. Amber, I especially appreciate your perspective, because I think in addition to, the messiness of this data, the system is still very new. And so, there is a lot of things from a technical perspective that are going on that we don't know about. When I was putting some of these numbers together, there was a lot of data entry issues that had to do with dates being entered that couldn't exist because AZ Point didn't exist in 2002. And so, when we're thinking about drawing some very specific conclusions about this data, I think we definitely need to keep those technical issues in mind, and then Shayla told me once they had noticed that those date issues were happening, that a fix was put in place so that you absolutely cannot enter, 2002 as an entry date because the system didn't exist. So yes, I am, as a researcher, I am ecstatic at the idea of, using this data to inform future decisions and to evaluate the effectiveness of the system itself. But I do appreciate also, from a 30,000 foot view, being cautious with how we make generalizations and how we interpret the data, and recognizing the fact that this is also very new data and we need to make sure that we are being responsible with the conclusions that we are drawing and the assumptions that we're making.
Thank you. But it is very exciting. Now that we are in its third and fourth year, the amount of data that we have available to us to do this type of understanding and to draw on that for improvements or policy proposals moving forward, I think gives us some new opportunity.
Yes.
This is good stuff.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
Perfect. So great job, Allison. So the last slide we have on there. Last slide.
I'm being befuddled again. One moment.
Yeah, no problem. So the last things that, in terms of focus, the last slide we have, just to the last one down from there.
There we go.
The kind of the last things we wanted to talk about are some ideas. One, or focus. One that Amber alluded to, in talking about ADRS, is we want to continue as a task force somehow to come up with supporting these, local county or local, reconciliations, working with ADRS, kind of pushing them in that direction. That's, whatever we can do in terms of suggesting, promoting, rewarding, anything that we can do to push them into, these groups. And again, I go back, my frame of reference is back, the Mojave County, where they meet, everyone meets and they kind of figure out where they went wrong and or fix whatever data elements they have. But that's a big piece. The other one, which I've done a lot of study and research on, is the retention of data management personnel in our criminal justice agencies. And I'm sure a number of folks here, Amber in particular, in a group, can attest to, new people coming in and out of that data management process from agencies and having to train and retrain, the same agencies over and over again. I think it's important for us as a task force to come up with some ideas of how to incentivize retaining these folks in agencies so that there's not turnover. I don't, and I'll ask, because again, I've been on sabbatical for a while, and Amber, you're probably closest to this than anything. Is that still an issue that you have in terms of the turnover in these agencies?
It is, but I think that the outreach that DPS is doing, like I said, we're hosting 3 classes a month. So 2 of them are at DPS. One of them is in person, one of them is virtual to reach the whole state. And then we're going to each and every county at least once per year to hold in-person trainings and trying to bring everybody within that county together Where are we this week?
We're gonna go to Stafford. So
Stafford this week. So, or next week, Greenlee County and Graham are going to be in one room. So we're trying to get out there to those counties so they don't have the excuse of, well, we didn't know. And we're trying to hit that county every year the same month. So every May we're in Stafford area to meet with that group so that if they have new people, they can push them to the meetings. So I think that's helping a lot. And then we're doing a lot of in-person training where like Peoria can call me and say, hey, Amber, I need somebody to come sit with me for an hour. So we're doing a lot of that too. So I think it's breaking down those barriers and taking some of the stigma away from DPS being the rule makers and not touchable. We very much want to be partners with all 500 agencies in the state.
Is it possible when you're out doing this that I'm just kind of interested or would be interested in finding out if, keeping these people on board is a matter of is it, are they getting paid? Are the hours? Are they getting the support they need in terms of assisting them? Because I know this part of our criminal justice systems is often not the ones that get paid the most.
Well, obviously, pay is always an issue for all of us. None of us ever get paid enough. I think another big, especially for my staff, all the legislative changes that put all the additional work onto us with no resources and no funding. Then we get a lot of pushback from other agencies. Well, why are you asking us to do this now? Well, it's because DPS was just mandated to do it. So we get a lot of pushback there, but our staff are typically entry-level staff, and so they use the criminal history unit as a way to step to the next position. And I think a lot of court personnel do similar things. I know that in the jails, obviously, if you're working in detention, that's a very negative environment. So people don't stay there sometimes for a long time, or they rotate to other aspects within the jail. I did that for 6 years, and I can't believe I lasted that long. But pay is always a part of it. Shift work for my staff and staffs within the jails is obviously a thing. Some people don't like shift work. Being away from your family weekends and holidays is hard.
Okay. All right. Well, it's just one of those things that I think, I just want to take care of the people that are actually, where the rubber hits the road in terms of data management and anything that we can do to support that, because it's critical to, accurate and timely records. So, but your outreach program and your traveling roadshow is fantastic.
Thank you. I think another big thing that DPS and I feel that some of the courts struggle with is that we're oftentimes given orders by judges that don't make any sense and are violating state law or violating the letter of the law. And those clerks in DPS don't have the authority to tell a judge that they made a decision that violated a law. So when I see something like that, where like, for example, we have expungements coming through, which an expungement should only be for marijuana and it's for a criminal trespass or domestic violence. And I have to send it back to the court. And then the court personnel is like, well, the judge said to. Well, it's not legal, so I'm not going to do it. So maybe some more education for the judges on the laws they're deciding. Especially when it comes to restorations or the big one we've been seeing lately is judges issuing wrongful arrest orders where they're stating the subject was wrongfully arrested when in fact it was an identity theft situation. So they're telling us to delete the defendant's criminal history because he used somebody else's name. Those types of things where then I'm having to communicate with the court and say that's not the right order. So just something to put out there.
Okay. All right. This is the time where we bring up any other issues that people want to discuss. What we plan to do is we've taken down notes. We want to task force it not to have big meetings all the time and have want to get down to kind of working group levels on some of these issues. A few folks that volunteer that have, small groups of 5 or 6 that we can put together to kind of tackle some issues that we have with existing programs to get them finished. And like AZ Point and data analysis, it would be probably interesting to start having a group to start frame out some ideas of issues that we can then kind of bubble up, through the commission and to other folks to, okay, so here's what we want to look at. And, the reason why, kind of helping Allison kind of and Matt's team zero in on, data sets that we can look at. So that is where we want to go with the task force. More kind of smaller group working pieces, which means kind of, I wouldn't say ad hoc meetings, but ones that we put together. There's a few of us, we discuss ideas and then build them up and float them out to the larger task force, and then see where we go from there with some of these things. So anything anyone wants to say? Well, all I can say is I'm glad I'm back. My other side of my business is floating in the drug development world, and although the travel's fun and the people I work with are fun, it kind of gets away from the criminologist side of what I like to do. So good to be back, and it's going to be an exciting time, I think, here in the future. Some big things could change in terms of what we're doing in Arizona. So Lloyd, Andy.
Thank you. Our next meeting will be at the Law Enforcement Summit again. We have blocked 1 to 4 for the big task force meeting. As Tony said, we'll have some working groups in the interim, but that Tuesday, 1 to 4 in Flagstaff will be the next big convening of the group.
What date in July is that?
Oh no, I had it. One moment.
Wait. It would be Tuesday the 9th.
Thank you.
July 9th.
So good. What big trip am I coming off of before that?
Right. And we'll have some hold the dates going out soon. Once again, I'd like to thank Tony Colson and Allison and Molly for their presentations. We do appreciate all your support, everyone on the task force, and we'll be contacting you for some of the work, and look forward to seeing you in person in Flagstaff.
Hey, Lloyd.
Yes, Andy.
I think it's the following week.
It's the following week?
Think so. Hold on, I'm trying to look real quick too. Because Hyde is having their award ceremony on the 16th.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were right. The Law Enforcement Summit, our session is Tuesday, July 16th, 1 to 4. Tuesday, July 16th, 1 to 4.
Great. I'll bring my motorcycle.
Thank you, Andy.
You got it.
Okay, and with that, we'll close the task force meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Okay.